Good afternoon, good morning for participants and colleagues on different time zones. We would like to welcome you all to our session on irrigation. Resources management analyst with the World Bank. Together with my colleague Wilfred, we will be senior water resources management specialist. We will be facilitating or moderating this session. This session actually comes in a timely manner where the government is embarking on its ambitious program on irrigation modernization. Throughout the session, we will be hearing more from key experts that is present with us on key challenges, opportunities, prerequisites for modernization, as well as lessons learned from international experience, private sector perspective, and many more. So with this, we have 1 hour and a half for the session. We would, it's a bit squeezed, so we try to maintain to our agenda. The agenda briefly will go through the keynote speech, opening remarks, and then keynote speech presentations, 2 presentations followed by a panel discussion. 2 logistical issues that 2 logistical notes that we want to share with you as the participants and the presenters are presenting their presentations. Please type in your questions in the question and answer tab or the chat box, and we will be checking that and responding. For speakers who are not speaking, please mute your microphones. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ayat Sulaiman, Regional Director for Sustainable Development for MENA region in the World Bank, to give her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Hiba. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Sabah al-khair, masa al-khair. It's really a pleasure to be present with you today in this session. It's a technical session, but I really thought it was important that I joined because it's part of work that has a lot of history and a lot of opportunity for the future. So let me first welcome Dr. Ragab Abdelazim, Dr. Safwat Abdeldaim, I guess Dr. Saad Nassar, if he is connected with us, and the whole technical team that has been working on this activity. And I'm really delighted to be with you today for this discussion on irrigation modernization in Egypt. It's a big part of of course, of the national water resources management plan of the country, and it is part of the vision of the country on how to embark on a modernization approach for both its old and its new land. And very pleased to see that it is done in very close partnership, obviously, as has always been the case between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Water Resources. I'm also very delighted because it is very critical and timely for Egypt to put it on a sustainable trajectory in terms of a comprehensive approach to using water resources and transforming the agriculture sector. And that's why I'm pleased to see also our ag colleagues with us, and to really have that integrated vision of how the water will serve for an ag sector that is more productive, more contributing to the economy, and more to growth more broadly. It's also critical, and I'm pleased to hear that this work is being done, as has been also the case in the past, but more in focus now, in terms of really involving all the stakeholders. There's a lot of thinking around the investments that need to go into the sector and the partnerships that need to happen with the private sector, with the financial sector, and of course with the farmers as the primary users of the resource. So all these issues, I know, have manifested in the work and have been a strong part of your discussion and of the dialogue that you have. Another element that is really timely and where I wanted to share with you our approach in MENA region and in sustainable development is because of the current crisis that the world and of course the region and Egypt are going through with COVID-19. COVID-19 has put, of course, a lot of pressure on economic growth in all over the globe. In MENA region in specific, we're seeing a contraction of -5.7% of GDP across MENA. Egypt perhaps is less hit. It has a little bit more to do with the way that the economy has performed in the past year and also the data. But in general, of course, it is a hard hit for all the countries. And what we are saying is it is either going to be a hit that is going to be very difficult to recover from, or it can be seen as an opportunity. And I think that the work that you're doing today and that you're discussing today is central to Egypt looking at a recovery from COVID as an opportunity. And let me share with you why. We are saying that jobs are going to be critical for the recovery. Egypt will need more jobs. That has been the case before COVID, but of course, as a recovery from COVID and with the slowdown, with the recession that we're seeing everywhere, jobs are critical. But what kind of jobs? We need sustainable jobs. We need jobs that are able to produce value added and to be available in the long term. And for that, the agriculture sector, of course, is a mainstay of the economy. How do you transform the agriculture sector that has been employing 30% of the labor force, has been contributing about 12% of GDP in Egypt? It has gone down in share, but it has a lot of opportunity, as we know, and it has earned 20% of exports. So how do you really bring about the right kind of jobs and boost the economic opportunity after COVID? That's where the agriculture sector, I think, comes in, and that's why the conversation around water is very critical. The other element of a COVID recovery that we really emphasize is inclusion. It is extremely important, and we're seeing that around the world, that if the recovery from COVID is not inclusive, especially in a region like MENA, it will further harm and reduce the stability and the ability of MENA countries to grow, recover, but also to really provide stable economic foundations for its people. And for that, we need to think of the vulnerable groups. And I'm very pleased to see that in this work, looking at small farmers, looking at smallholders, looking at all stakeholders is a critical part of it. For example, when we look, and I'm just going to share, the broader picture, if we look at education today and how education is being delivered in the COVID world, the populations that have access to online resources are able to access resources of education much more readily than those that don't. Let's transform that vision also into the sector that we are working on today and that we're discussing today, and seeing, are we sure that we are putting in place policies that really bring about inclusive practices for everybody? Can all farmers benefit? Can all value chain contributors benefit? And how are we ensuring that transformations, including digital transformations, bring about the needed change for everybody and does not leave anyone behind? The last point, of course, and this is no stranger to Egypt in particular, is the resilience. COVID shock is one shock, but climate shocks, and we keep saying that, are not going away. They will continue, and they will increase in intensity with the trajectory that the world is going at. And so climate resilience and understanding the risks that climate poses on the resources is extremely critical. And I really hope that in the second phase of this work, in the policy recommendations, we also integrate that very highly in the way that you're thinking in the future. So really looking at jobs that bring about value added for everybody, looking at inclusion for those that may be left behind, and looking at resilience to shocks, including climate shocks and disaster shocks, are critical ways to recover from the COVID crisis and are very relevant to the work that you are discussing today. I know that this technical assistance has been requested by Egypt as a way of a forward look in a sector that has seen a lot of effort. I've been personally, contributing and working with our dear colleagues on this over the years. But now is really the time to think of what does the future bring for Egypt. There's a lot of opportunity. I know that this is the diagnostic phase, and there will be another phase on the policy recommendations and the policy note. Very much looking forward to hearing your views on ensuring that we have captured well the challenges, opportunities, and prerequisites, and also given you the right level of global experiences of today. We've been, of course, accompanying the sector over the years, World Bank teams over the last 2 decades at least. But let's hear from you. And then I also wanted to emphasize that some of the recommendations that are coming out already from the diagnostic look at, emphasize the entirety of the system, looking at hardware as well as software, looking at on-farm as well as off-farm, and also including the small farmers, as I have mentioned. And really keeping in mind that sustainability aspect in terms of land and water resources that the country has. So let me, with that, thank everybody who has contributed. I wish you a very good session. I will be with you for another 15 minutes, but really looking forward to hearing from you all and from the team afterwards on the recommendations that are coming out of this, making the policy recommendations as actionable as possible. And what I would like to end with is a commitment on our side to accompany this process. There's a lot of opportunity in terms of packaging investments, packaging support mechanisms, and we would really very much welcome your ideas on how the World Bank can contribute to this next phase going forward. With that, very much thank you for inviting me, and all the best for the rest of the session. Thank you.
For the insightful keynote opening remarks. And now we would like to move to Dr. Ragab Abdelazim, First Undersecretary, who will be providing the keynote speech on behalf of His Excellency the Minister. Dr. Ragab, please go ahead.
Yes, Heba. Thank you. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we do hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, good morning, Dr. Ayat and all distinguished participants. On behalf of His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Abdel-Ati, Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation, I'd like to welcome all of you in this important session, really, regarding the modern irrigation implementation in Egypt. We all know the challenges facing water situation in Egypt, where there is a big gap between available water and water demand. You know that water demand is about 20 billion cubic meter more than supply, and this is a big challenge. However, the ministry is closing the gap now through using drainage water and groundwater. And this year, a distinct reuse project completed to treat Mahsama drainage water at tertiary, high-level treatment, tertiary treatment, and it is reused in irrigation. Also, another big project, we call it Bahr al-Baqar, reuse project through treatment of drainage water. And according to the National Water Resource Plan issued in 2017, the ministry has started an ambitious national program to rehabilitate all branch canals with about 20,000 kilometers, including regulators and offtakes along these branch canals. So this plan was conceived at the beginning of this year to complete rehabilitation of 6,000 kilometers in 2 years, to be done by 2022. This program, by the way, creates lots of jobs for villagers who work on this project. Another national program is the implementation of modern irrigation, and this program is being implemented now jointly between Ministry of Water Resources and the Ministry of Agriculture. A plan covering 1 million faddan will be completed in this year, 2020 and mid of 2021. This 1 million faddan includes areas in the fringes of Delta and deserts, oases and Nile Valley Governorate. And as you know, this is very important for farmers in these areas because the water is limited, especially in the fringes. In fact, the farmers' initiatives to implement modern irrigation was the driving force for the government to establish such a national program. Farmers were satisfied with the modern irrigation, where agricultural productivity and income increased. The cost also decreased through this modern irrigation practices. Another point, and to spread the modern irrigation, we found that farmer-to-farmer dialogue has a great impact on awareness and convincing neighboring farmers to implement modern irrigation. So the ministry conducted seminars and media campaign for farmers to present their experience. The second plans of modern irrigation will be focusing on 5 million faddans of the old land. Priorities will include sugarcane areas and horticultures, trees and orchards to have modern irrigation system. So, and to implement modern irrigation system in all lands, some points need to be investigated, and really we have asked National Water Research Centers and other departments working in that field to take care of and to look at these points. First, we have a problem with the land fragmentation. So, how to find suitable system to solve this issue, and are looking for similar experience and experience of other countries, so we can learn from. The impact on soil salinity and drainage network. We're expecting that the soil salinity will be affected by through using the modern irrigation. Also, the crop selection and the suitability. Which crop is suitable for each type of modern irrigation? Sprinkler irrigation has some crops suitable to be grown. Modern irrigation, drip irrigation, maybe different crops. And also crop selection of land of this areas which have land fragmentation. How to get farmers agree on a certain crop, or do we have a system that cover crop diversification or different crops in one area, like agriculture plots or something like that. Also, we have to look at institutional issues, especially the Water User Association. Can they play a role in implementing the modern irrigation? There is also another very important point to look at, the trade-off between modern irrigation and a system, we used to call it controlled drainage system. Also controlled drainage have been implemented before. We had pilot areas, and now we have modern irrigation. So we need to look at these two systems and to select the suitable system for each area or region. Also to look at modern irrigation in northern delta. It may have impact on seawater intrusion. So at what location we can implement the modern irrigation in delta? We can say that northern Tanta, we cannot use modern irrigation, for example. So it's an important point to be considered. Other points like climate change effect. We know that there is a relation between climate changes and increase in temperature, increase in crop consumptive uses, increase in soil salinity. So this can be also considered. The ministry also is looking for localization of technology of modern irrigation equipment. This is very important to have factories and have enough to provide farmers with irrigation equipment and other supplies. I mean, these are some issues. We have asked many research and consultant people to look at these issues in order to have a right policy to implement the modern irrigation, since we are moving fast now to implement modern irrigation. As I said, in 1 million faddan is already implementing now, but this is in the fridges, and this is very important to have modern irrigation in that. The law, the irrigation law, involves implementing modern irrigation in fringes area and the desert, because the soil type is mainly sandy. However, we are looking also for all the lands as farmers themselves who asked for modern irrigation, even in all the lands. So what we are looking for is to improve the existing policy through considering these issues and mitigation measures to the issues I mentioned, and maybe other issues can be discussed during this session. So also technical and field assessment is required to come up with good recommendations and solutions. It is not only to have an office report or a study or something. We need to look at, we need to go to the field in Egypt and conduct assessment, meeting with farmers who implement modern irrigations. And we need to listen to their problems, to their complaints, because they are implementing modern irrigations, but sometimes they have some issues they need to have solutions for them. So these are the way we need to move forward. We need, as I said, to learn from farmers' experience, and to solve these issues either for farmers or for the governments. So, this is what we need, is to how to, formulate all issues on both sides, government and farmers, and then to have solutions and the assessment of experiments or pilots in Egypt or areas implementing now in Egypt, and looking for other experience in other countries. I don't want to talk too much, but I wish to you all successful session, full of fruitful discussions, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raghav, for this insightful background on how the government is pursuing on irrigation modernization. Indeed, it actually helps formulate the second step after our diagnostic, to see that the government has a clear vision of where they want to go, and they have specific areas where they need the support. And I think one of the things that came out of the diagnostic, and I think the presenters will be shedding more light, is the diagnostic had benefited from meeting with farmers, especially on the people that have done the pilots. And we would be hearing from Dr. Safwat and Charles later on how what was the perspective of the farmers and what they saw as things that went right, well, and what are the challenges that they face. We'll be hearing that in a while. So this actually leads to presenting the second presentation coming up. Dr. Safwat Abdedaim will be presenting irrigation modernization opportunities, challenges, and institutional changes. And he, Dr. Safwat is Professor Emeritus in the National Water Research Center, and as well as a former drainage advisor to the World Bank. Dr. Safwat, please go ahead and share your presentation.
Thank you, Heba, and I hope I'm heard now for everybody. Good afternoon, all. Dr. Rajab, Dr. Ayat, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it will be my pleasure to do my presentation. I need to get share access in order to put my presentation on the screen. I don't have it yet.
It's already assigned to you. So you would have to push share content.
Yes, the share icon is not activated on my screen yet. I am getting some help here from the share. Share. They are just in a minute or less.
You are assigned.
Okay. Okay. Hmm? Okay. It is the end. This is the end of the. Okay, I think I can. Do you see my screen now?
We can hear and we can see your screen.
Yes.
You cannot hear or see my screen.
We can hear you and we see the screen.
Yes, yes.
Oh, so you see the screen now, right?
Yes.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, okay. Well, of course, my presentation which is based on the diagnostic study and will come to iterate many of the issues raised by Ayat as well as by Dr. Ragab, because I think all we are on the mainstream of going through all the deep issues involved in modernization. So just my presentation will start with background information. Some of them have been said already, and then the main focus will be on the opportunities and the challenges. I appreciate very much Dr. Ragab saying that the ministry is after going through developing a holistic approach towards modernization, and that actually is the main drive of the diagnostic study. Then after that, some messages will be coming from the diagnostic report, will be at the end of my presentation. My screen still shows Dr. Ragab Abdulazim's screen on overposed. I hope this is not your case. Well, when talking about water for agriculture, I think agriculture the biggest consumer of fresh water resources. Agricultural water comes from two main sources: the fresh water resources and the non-conventional water resources. Fresh water resources, Nile water is the main contributor, then augmented by groundwater and the little rainfall on the northern coast. As non-conventional water, drainage water reuse play a great role to close the gap between supply and demand, as Dr. Ragab mentioned. Give more in-depth on in some figures, on key figures. We know all that Egypt's share from the Nile is 55.5 billion cubic meter. The whole water available according to Water Master Plan in 2015 was 59.25, and during 13, I'm trying to just move because some of my screen is hidden. It doesn't work. All right. Let me say that go then allocation for agriculture is in 2015 was 61.1 billion cubic meter and expected in 2037 60 billion. The close of the deficit between supply, the agricultural requirements and the supply comes mainly from drainage water reuse as well as some treated wastewater. Well, irrigation drainage system in Egypt is a complex system. It starts from the Aswan Dam to the main trunk of the Nile through main branch canals and main canals and branch canals to the on-farm system, which is called Meskas and Marwas, to the field plots to irrigate. Overlaid on this is a similar drainage system go into the opposite direction from the field drains to branch collectors to branch drains to main drains flowing out to the sea. Underneath this is the Nile aquifer, and all together is perform as one closed system interconnected. Agriculture and agribusiness actually is very important sector for Egypt's economy, and it Ayat mentioned some of it. It is contribution for more than 35% to the GDP. It is represented nearly 20% of the total export potential of the country. It is the single largest contributor to employment. It's among the highest producer in the world for several crops, and it is a large, fastest growing agriculture domestic market, and it has a competitive export market to Europe and to Gulf area in the region. Well, now we move to the potential risks in the potential benefits of modernization. It is already many of them said, but I just wanted to summarize here. On the water side, there will be rational use for irrigation water. There will be uniformity of water distribution on all the farms. There is equity distribution for all water users from the beginning of the canal to the tail end. This will reflect in agriculture benefits, as has been said already, yield increase, crop diversification, as more water supply will be more reliable, and the farmers can move to producing high cash crops. At the national scale, of course, this will result in enhancing food security. It will be the very big contributor for employment in the future, and altogether will lead to economic growth in the country. There are some issues that have been the diagnostic report addressed based on the review of literature, the interviews with all the stakeholders. Let us come first to the water balance at the farm level. Assuming that this schematic drawing shows a profile in the field, and then if irrigation, assuming it is modernized, there will be evapotranspiration, percolation beneath the root zone of the plants, and then there is contribution to deep seepage recharging the groundwater and flow to the drains. What will be the consequence of modernization on this water balance? Irrigation water needs or application will be less as a result of the improvement. Evapotranspiration will increase as a result of a healthy plant covering all the field due to the advantages mentioned already. Drainage water will decrease, and groundwater recharge will decrease as well because of the water balance together. So while we have rationalized water, irrigation water on the farm scale, which is obvious, the reduction of drainage and water and the groundwater recharge will result overall the command areas or the national scale to not too much water saving, because fresh water saved has to go to where there will be deficit or decrease in drainage water and the groundwater. The other issue that needs to be considered in the holistic approach the ministry is after is to look into the consequences of spreading out of conjunctive use of groundwater and irrigation to the new modernized farms. We noticed from all the pilots implemented by farmers during the past 2-3 years that most of them drilled wells and conjunctive use groundwater together with the water supply to have a reliable supply if there is some short from the canal system. Now, if we can just take a moment and think of spreading this practice over the whole 5 million faddans that Dr. Ragab mentioned, especially in the old lands, there will be consequence of the depletion of the Nile aquifer. This is a potential existing, and seawater intrusion may increase. The current groundwater shown in the map to the right could extend to reach more inland intrusion of salty water. And this will be one of the effects that we don't like to happen due to modernization. That will be more pressure on the groundwater aquifer and the threat for salinization. Another issue that has to be considered also in the holistic approach, that in using drip irrigation, especially on heavy soils, around the drip points, there is wetted area. At the beginning, that will be okay, and of course, farmers will notice increase in the yield, will be happy. But there is a risk always that due to this and in the arid climate, there are evaporation from the soil surface, and there will be development of salinity on the surface and around the moistened part of the soil profile under the dripper, and desalinization may happen down the road in sometimes in shorter time, maybe 2-3 years of accumulated salts. To explain this more, there are two profiles across the soil profile, the soil here. The one to the left, the dripper on the surface, and salt accumulation between the drip lines. And the risk is in the next crop, if the drip lines are moved, some of them will come into the most salt affected area. To the right, when the dripper is below the soil, this is more risky for salinization, as the capillary rise from the wetted area will make more salination or accumulation of salts spreading over the top soil. And that, of course, the consequence, there's the risk of land resource degradation, another factor that will be seriously considered in the holistic approach. And I would like to mention here that surveys conducted by the ministry in the pilot area all showed that this risk is taking place. Now we come to the institutional challenges. Of course, it is in mind that modernization is a drastic change in approach and in the practice in Egypt from flood system to modern system when it is over the whole country. And institutional challenges will be different from what we used in the past, but also from learning from the lessons during the irrigation improvement era took place during the past 20 years. Interministerial coordination at all levels is prerequisite, and we have seen our lessons documented from during the irrigation improvement project that sometimes when lack of coordination, there are problems, delay of the projects, especially where between ministries or between departments or even between the government representative and farmers in the field. Okay, now another
Okay, so 3 more minutes to go.
Okay, I think I'm almost done. There is a need for shifting from operational management approach to service provision approach, and my colleague Charles will elaborate more on this. Dealing with land fragmentation and the small holdings. So this is a very big problem in Egypt, and actually a challenge for both agriculture and water management, and with the small farms and small holdings is a problem. Establishing functional water user association, we know that there was success stories, but it has to be scaled up and be considered. On the policy side, modernization will bring many issues, political, technical, institutional, economic, social conditions. Among these are complementarity between agricultural and policies and actions for irrigation modernization. This is very important, and I'm happy to learn and be knowing that this has started already since the launching of the issue of modernization between the two ministers. But this has to be trickled down at all levels to continue complementarity. Alternative sources of finance to modernize on-farm system. When the government said that farmers will invest themselves in modern system, they will need alternative sources for finance. Operational regulatory framework is very needed. Targeted policies to include small-scale farmers in the value chain, as Ayat said. Finally, options to manage the land fragmentation constraints. This is one of the issues that has to be discussed with farmers and some policies to be in place. Finally, the messages that I wanted to quickly mention, there is indeed potential to further support to productivity of water in the country for use in agriculture, and this requires modernization of the irrigation services. If on-farm irrigation systems are scaled up, there is a risk of resource-based degradation, as mentioned, and this will require the development of strategies and the plans for to address the conjunctive use and soil salinity management issues. Message 3 is in the past, Egypt irrigation institutional land shows success stories, some problems, and this has to be really considered in the future at all levels. Third, the fourth message is inclusion of small-scale farmers are important, as already mentioned. I need not to elaborate more on this. Finally, with high expected export potential in the country, modernization will play a big role, and it has to be seriously considered and well done. And then final message is a lot of is at stake if Egypt does not succeed to modernize its irrigation system economically, institutionally, socially, and environmentally. That will bring us to my last screen. Is modernization is needed, but it should be rightly done. And I appreciate what Dr. Ragab said, that it has been to be done through a holistic approach. Thank you very much for your attention.
We're running out of time, so we'll move. Hello? Hello?
Yes, I hear you. We hear you.
Yes, we hear you.
To Dr. Charles, Professor and Chairman of Irrigation Training and Research Center, Cal Poly University, will be presenting principles and engineering practices for irrigation modernization in Egypt. Charles, please, and please to try to maintain the 15 minutes so that we can have time for the panel and for questions as well.
I will try. I need to receive the sharing thing here. Here we go, I think.
It should be there now.
I think so. We're moving a little faster now, huh? Here we go. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope mine isn't just a repeat, but really I'm going to continue on with what Dr. Safwat had. What we did in this diagnostic report, getting it, is we took a look at modernization efforts in Egypt and abroad, and there are certainly lessons to be learned everywhere. And as Dr. Safwat said, there are concepts and engineering principles. We have plenty of experience that we know how to do it right. And this report has many, many details that we just will not be able to cover right now. However, the devil is in the details. With modernization, unless you really pay attention to the details, it just doesn't work very well. The next point here is that we're talking about the whole system from the Nile to the field, not pieces. And then also, as Dr. Sopwat said, there's infrastructure and institutional things. The primary benefits, I'll several times, is they will occur on farm and with aquifer sustainability. Now, just as a kind of an introduction here, we might take a look at conventional approaches to irrigation investments. Basically, two of the most dominant investments are canal lining and drip irrigation. But, and of course, drip and modern irrigation are declared priorities. But the thing is that drip irrigation needs flexible and constant and reliable supplies, and rotation deliveries are just incompatible. So here's the first observation. Drip and irrigation in Egypt is only common in two situations. One is if farmers have wells, and the other one is if fields are adjacent to canals, and so they're not subject to rotation deliveries. And we have irrigation speak. In other words, we have terminology, we have metrics that define water delivery service. And this is going to come up in my talk here, this concept of water delivery service. And having the irrigation departments function as service industries. A couple of the metrics that we have are reliability and stability. And then we break that down into frequency, rate, and duration. Now, it turns out that you have to have this excellent water delivery service, or you provide it, if you want to have good modern water resource management on the farm level. Obviously, you have to be able to adjust the frequency of irrigation, the flow rate, the duration. Farmers know this. And they understand that if they have good water management, they need good delivery service. And so what's going to happen? Obviously, what's going to happen is drip irrigation will continue to expand using groundwater. The problem is, this is observation number 3 that we have, is that water delivery service provided in the majority of the systems, down in the to the MESCA level, are just incompatible with modern on-farm irrigation management. Something has to change if you want to move that way. Observation 4 is then, if you put these together, drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation and irrigation scheduling, all of that wonderful stuff will not be successful in the majority of canal supplied areas as it is. Now I want to move on from on-farm to groundwater. Dr. Sopwat mentioned this. The observation number 5 is that it's a proven fact. There's no if and buts about it. You look at Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Mexico, India, Pakistan, Spain, the United States, Chile, Peru, and even in Egypt, is many people consider groundwater an independent water supply, but that it really isn't the case, especially in the Nile. You have to recharge it unless it's fossil water. It's recharged from somewhere. And really, it's like a bathtub. Bathtubs and aquifers share 3 features. You can store water in them, you have a way to get water in, and you have a way to get water out. And the fact is, if you get water out, in other words, by pumping, you better put water in if you want to keep it full. And that, of course, is generally in the form of irrigation inefficiencies. It's definitely not a water supply. We tend to count flow rates and volumes coming out of wells and canals and all that, but in the end, it's coming down that river. Or it is coming out of the groundwater, but it's depleting it, and you get overdraft. So, observation number 6, really what we're talking about with modernization is that Egypt needs flexible, controllable canal systems really for 2 scales. One is on farm, in other words, to support the farmers to obtain high quality and excellent yields, but the second one is basin wide. And you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, as we say here. In basin wide, you're dealing with water quality, water amounts, drainage management, and so on. And basically, you have to have control of the resource to manipulate it. Just to clarify, I'm not talking about annual allocations from down the river or monthly allocations. When you talk about modernization, you're talking about the ability to control and manipulate flows on a minute-to-minute basis. And I'm not talking about a computer-controlled thing and all that, but what I mean is flow rates are continuously changing, and out in the field, you're able to manage those changes effectively. So basically, I think in Egypt, just like has occurred in the United States, and I've been in this game since it more or less started on modernization, is one of the things I've had to work on is changing the mindset of irrigation agencies from one of expansion and construction. Because if you look at it, that's where the education was at one time. You know, how to line canals, how to expand areas, how do you get water? And we've moved into water management. We don't have this. And so this good control, the good control, pardon? Oh, okay. Good control really requires that we have adoption of a service mentality and a change in the operation of canals. And of course, it requires institutional and infrastructure changes. So the report has a lot of details, lots and lots of details, and hopefully everybody get a chance to read it. But, you know, one of the things is that you know, if you invest a lot in drip systems and MESCAs and that sort of thing and water user associations, in the end, if you don't have the resources to work with, the things tend to fail. And here's one as an example. You need a reliable electrical grid for pumps. And then, of course, you need the reliable, continuous, and flexible water availability to the MESCA. So the thing is, you have to consider this as a whole system, not just pieces. And the way I look at it, it's like a chain. And now this is kind of a lousy picture of a chain because it didn't fit on a vertical scale. But just imagine all these links here. And in the end, there's this farmer down there who's trying to do a good job and working hard. But basically, you have to have, you want to support that guy. And you have to have then at the beginning a prioritization, mobilization, kind of the same level as national defense. And then you have to have strategies, and then you have details, flexibility from the Nile. For example, if there's an 11-day lag time, which there is on the Nile, somehow that has to be dealt with. And of course, there are solutions. And that's not to say that the investments that have already been made in the Nile are wrong. It doesn't say that. All it says is there still remain things to be done. Then you have to have the correct infrastructure and management in the main canals. You have to have it in the secondary canals. You have problems like night storage. And finally, you know, you implement all this stuff. And in the end, in this chain is the farmer. And if any one of these breaks, it doesn't work too well. Then we have this concept, I want to really hit it, of a service-oriented utility. In other words, traditionally irrigation projects, and we still have this in the United States, we have irrigation authorities who think that they're the boss and they run things, and farmers really should adapt to them. And what we're moving to, of course, is this service-oriented utility. It says that everybody has to be on board. And really the purpose is the reason we exist is not to be the boss, but to provide water delivery service so that farmers can properly manage their water. And if they make an investment, the investment is somewhat secure. Obviously, there are pluses and minuses. You can't do everything. I understand that completely. But the service mentality at least says, hey, you do as much as you can. Nobody says it's easy. It costs money. It takes time. But hopefully we're all in a position where we're, that's what we're trying to do, is a better job. And but what we need is we need to clearly recognize, we need to diagnose, which is what our report was, what is the situation? And then we identify solutions, and then we try to implement them. So a little bit back to canal lining. And the reason I'm going to mention this, it was just one thing before, is because there's a lot of pushback on this typically. Here's some observations on canal lining. Observation number 7 here is usually it doesn't save water on a basin level, and Dr. Safwat clearly showed that you have a closed basin. Number 8, it can consume your budget, and there's not any money left for anything else. Number 9, it does nothing to increase flexibility of water delivery service. And number 10, it typically accelerates groundwater overdraft. So you really have to take a look, in other words, what I'm saying here, is you really have to take a strong look at the priorities of investment. And traditional investments don't necessarily move you forward. So what we're looking at here in modernization really is the water supplier provides customer requested service, obviously within limitations, rather than providing an existing procedure with supplier determined schedules. And that needs communications, institutions have to be upgraded, accountability, transparency, and all of that. It's not simple. Fortunately, here's what we have. All this stuff I'm talking about is not experimental. You don't need to do research for this. There are solutions that are directly applied to Egypt have already been implemented and successfully implemented in large scales. You don't usually try to solve everything at once. You have to work incrementally. But there have been a lot of lessons that have been learned in Egypt and internationally. And so this is not a mystery. Really, the biggest challenge will be institutional, I think. Now you have to do it right. You have to do this infrastructure stuff right. And you don't always get the right advice. But the solutions are out there. So what we have is a lot of details inside that report. And the presentation by myself and Dr. Safwat are really intended to stimulate the discussion. It's not to provide solutions at this stage. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles. And I think for the sake of time, we have 30 minutes. We will be moving to the panel discussion. I will give the floor to Wilfred, who will be moderating the panel discussion, to introduce the panelists and take it from there.
Well, thank you very much, Heba, for taking us through the whole process of the first part of this. And I'm very delighted to be able and to convene our discussion. My name is Wilfred Hundertmark, and I'm an irrigation and drainage specialist. And I'm involved in this project since some time. What I would like to do in the upcoming session, I'd like to perhaps take a step back and pick out some of the aspects that we heard from our distinctive keynote speakers and also from Dr. Ragab on various issues. And I would like to invite Dr. Saad Nasser, who is the advisor to the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, and he's also former governor of the Governorate of Fayoum. I would like to ask him, and I first have to give him also the microphone. Oh, it's already on. What is it actually that drives irrigation modernization? We have heard a lot about increasing productivity. We have heard about saving water, improving irrigation efficiency. We also hear economic growth, creating jobs. We heard about cost savings. We heard about food security. Also, reducing the dependency of food imports, but environmental aspects like soil salinity management. So many things we heard today, but what I would like to hear is what is actually driving irrigation modernization in Egypt? What's the main power behind this enormous and very, very ambitious program of 1 million Fedan in 2 years to be modernized? So to you, Dr. Nasser, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. As it has been previously mentioned by the speakers, that Egypt is facing a water deficit. The supply is about 60 billion cubic meters, 55.5% billion cubic meters from the Nile, and about 5 billion from underground and rain. We are not rain-fed area. The requirements are about 80 billion cubic meters a year, so there is a deficit 20 billion cubic meters. The Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation is trying to cover this deficit through recycling of water use. And then if we take into consideration also the virtual waters, the difference between water in the imported agricultural and food commodities and the water in the food and agricultural commodities exported, there is a deficit in the virtual water is about 34 billion cubic meters a year. So the deficit is huge. The supply is limited, the demand is increasing. Agriculture is consuming about 82% of total water consumed in Egypt. So the rationalization of water use in agriculture, it is a must. It is not a matter of only, as you mentioned, that it's not only a matter of saving water used in agriculture, but it also leads to increasing or developing or improving the fertility of soil. It avoids the salination of soil. It avoids the rising of underground soil water surface. So this will be reflected in increasing the yield and the productivity of the land or the soil. We have about 9.4 million acres of fiddans. 3.4 of them, or 3.3 million acres are in new reclaimed areas. 6.1 million acres is in the old land. So modernizing the irrigation system, it reflects in increasing the yield, and also it's reflected in improving the quality of the products produced. It also saves the time spent in irrigation. It saves also and reduces the cost of irrigation, like energy and extra and overheads. Therefore, this will be reflected in the final analysis in improvement of the net incomes of the farmers. Previously, we were interested in only the net revenue per land or per fiddan. Nowadays, in our in setting our optimum cropping pattern in Egypt, we are interested also in the revenue per cubic meter of water. Therefore, the irrigation modernization is a must. This is why the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation and Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation are adopting several policies and programs to modernize irrigation system in the agricultural sector. The first policy is, as you know, by law, all the new reclaimed areas has to be cultivated by modern irrigation system. However, there are some farmers or investors who are not following that, and they are adopting flood irrigation or surface irrigation in these areas. About 1 million acres are not following the modern irrigation system in the new reclaimed land. So the two ministries are nowadays implementing a policy to reinforce them to go back to the modern irrigation system instead of flood or surface irrigation. The second policy is to shift gradually in all the land, which is about 6.1 million acres, shift gradually from surface irrigation to modern irrigation systems, that's sprinkler or drip irrigation, starting by fruit trees areas, about 1 million acres cultivated by horticulture and fruit. So we can easily start by those shifting from surface irrigation to modern irrigation system. We know that in North Delta, there is an area where the land or the soil is saline, and part of it is cultivated by rice, which is considered as a reclaiming crop. In this area, we cannot shift from surface irrigation to modern irrigation because the soil is saline, as I mentioned, and again, to avoid the inclusion of red or seawater to the delta. Therefore, we should continue cultivating this area through surface irrigation, but through modern or improved or developed surface irrigation system. And we have a big project jointly implemented by the two ministries to improve or to develop the system in this area, which is the North Delta part, through an improved and developed system. The third policy is to limit the crops which are high in use of water. Like rice, we are limiting the area to be cultivated by rice to 700 to 1 million acres only. The sugar cane, which we are limiting the area to about 300,000 acres, and we are trying to replace it by sugar beet gradually as well. The banana also is high consuming water. We are trying to prohibit cultivating banana in new reclaimed areas, and the banana which is cultivated in the old land should adopt modern irrigation systems rather than service or flood irrigation. The fourth policy is the Agricultural Research Center is continuing in developing new varieties of crops which are higher yield, better quality, intolerant to stresses like salinity, drought, heat, humidity, and insects and diseases. And the main purpose is that they should use less requirements of water. We have new varieties of rice, new varieties of wheat, corn, sugarcane, which are less consuming water as well. The fourth or the fifth policy is, of course, we are also trying to modernize or adopt modern cultivation techniques like raised bed cultivation, drill cultivation, and land leveling using laser units, because this also saves water and saves seeds and all these things. Through these policies and the programs, we are trying to save water, to improve quality of products, increase productivity, improve the net incomes of the farmers, obtain higher degree of food security, and we are not using the word self-sufficiency because we are believing more in food security at large, that is sustainability, availability, accessibility, and safety, and at the same time expanding the products where we have comparative and competitive advantages, exporting them and importing those commodities where we have less advantage. We have self-sufficiency of several crops, vegetables and fruits, and we have excess for export. Luckily that our exports during the last year increased in spite of this COVID-19 and the Corona, and we are trying to achieve higher degree of those commodities where we have less competitive advantage. We have deficit in wheat and oils and seeds and oil and sugar.
Dr. Nasser. Dr. Saad Nasser?
Yes. And therefore, I mean the modernization of irrigation is not only a matter of saving water, but also increasing the productivity, improving the quality, and increasing the production, and improving the net incomes of farmers, and achieving a higher degree of food security at large. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Saad Nasser. Very, very comprehensive answer to actually a very simple question, but that's already an indication of how complex the issues are, and how we and the ministries and policies need to respond to these policies. I had actually thought that I would ask the same question to Dr. Ragab. Dr. Ragab, if you summarize what you said earlier, what's the main driver behind modern irrigation in Egypt? Just in just one sentence, please.
Okay. Thank you, Wilfred. As I heard from the presentation, I think there is a need for modern irrigation. Everyone is about that because increase in yield. So the driving force, as we said before, is this is a farmer really needs. He needs that to increase the productivity, and also the government like to have production increased. So this is it means optimization of each drop of water. We have it in Egypt. So I think all of us, we support implementing modern irrigation, either farmers or the government. The second point, to have this successful, as mentioned, the two ministers, Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Irrigation, have to work together. And actually we work together. We developed the plan together of modern irrigation. You know, in parallel to that, you know, we are modernizing the infrastructure also. You know, the canals also to solve the problems of water allocation. And as Dr. Bert said that canal lining is expensive and will not increase accessibility to water allocation. No, this is not correct. I mean, lining water is very important, you know, because are long canals. Some of them are 20 kilometers. One canal, you know, to provide water for a distance of 20 kilometers. So to have water or limited water under water scarcity, you know, now we are not able to convey water to the end of canal. So through lining, you know, we can make sure that the water comes to the canal end and all farmers get their water on time. This is the importance of
right.
Canal lining.
No, well, yeah. This is perhaps
one point only. When we talk about water saving, we have to be very careful about using this term. Really, it can be localized water saving, you know, because Egypt is really suffering from water scarcity now, and in a few years we will approach acute water scarcity. So globally, no water saving. It can be localized. So if you save water at a certain area, you can another area, but we still have this water. But globally, I would expect water saving from modernization, but to solve water issues and to increase productivity. This is the driving, you know, to the modern irrigation and the modernization of infrastructure.
Thank you very much. That's a nice summary. Now, we have already now touched upon a number of issues. What we haven't heard is what actually happens elsewhere, and that was one of the reasons why you have asked the World Bank to provide assistance and to provide some recommendations on the international experience. Now I'm very pleased to introduce to you our global lead for water and agriculture, Peter Wallawein, who has joined us from Washington, and he is much familiar with the situation in other countries. And Peter, I would like you to give us a flavor of what the modernization success stories actually are in countries that are compatible and comparable with the situation in Egypt. So, Peter, over to you, please.
Thank you, Wilfried. Good afternoon, everybody. Masal here. I think much has been said also by the other speakers. Charles also highlighted some of the experiences. And it's good to know this is not a uniquely Egyptian problem. Farming globally constitutes 70% of the freshwater withdrawals, and has to compete everywhere with uses of much higher value. So just like here in Egypt, and everywhere we see that this promotion of water-saving technologies as the way to reduce agricultural water consumption, and I think you have all are warned that is probably very aspirational and probably not very realistic. And so time and again, we see the following. I think the key things I think we see in most cases is that irrigation modernization is super important because this high efficiency irrigation enables a radically new type of agricultural production. New way of farming, much higher stability, much higher productivity, much more attuned to the needs of farmers to diversify and get a much wider range of crops. And so it's the right thing to do for your farmers. It is only in a very small minority of cases that we see that there are actually real water savings. And that should not be the driving force, because on farming, as has been discussed already, on-farm savings do not translate to system-wide savings, because most of the so-called losses are actually recoverable. So in fact, there was a recent article this year which compared 250 international cases from the US, from Europe, from India, China, Egypt, and came to that conclusion that yes, all of these cases present a great improvement for farming systems, and very few actually present a water saving. So, but then to come to some specifics on what are key successes and lessons, I think we can say a key lesson is change the institution that changes to pipes, right? So the technology in itself, we have seen cases in countries in the Mediterranean where canals have been changed to pipes and pressurized systems, but no change in service attitude. So you basically only cut out the leakage losses, which, as we just discussed, are not real losses. So you're not fixing the real issue, which is a service mentality, a service attitude, which is enabled by the technology. So you spend a lot of money on getting the new technologies in, but you don't actually change how you define what your service is to the farmer, that she gets water every day when he or she wants. She can communicate with the agency to make sure the water is there. The billing is changed. So if you modernize the system and you keep your old way of service delivery, it will only cut a small part of the problem and not the real problem, which is farmers being able to change on a daily basis. And I think the bigger lesson is that, and this is what we see from countries like China or other, even again in the Mediterranean, the only thing that really saves water is water conservation policies, which is strict monitoring, allocating, enforcement of these allocations. And that has been proven to be the only real way of saving water, and it's much cheaper anyway than the modernization technologies. And pricing and technology changes will not do that, but they are a very important complement. And I think what the last lesson I want to share is, I think from let's say from Spain, Australia, there's an importance in overcoming resistance from farmers. If farmers see that this whole modernization is there to save water, and there is no clear objective to them, they are seen as the problem rather than as allies in this whole system. So what happens in some of these places is compensating farmers, buybacks of the water, and using that water so that the benefits to society, which is a real water saving wherever that's needed, combines with the benefit to the farmer, which is a better service, and it can be used to make those investments that are needed. So it's carrots and sticks. I think these are important lessons in the whole process of modernization. The carrot being a much improved input into your farming system, and the stick being a much better control of water use beyond, and a hope that things will improve if we improve the technology. So I think a lot of money can be spent on modernization, but if we are not very clear on the specific objectives we want to achieve, we will probably only achieve partially the objectives, which is fine, but it's very good to be very clear in the expectations, and so that you can find a cost-effective mix of the technology change, but also the service delivery change, as well as how to finance it. And I think that will be important for the next step of this endeavor, which is to see how are we going to finance, how are we going to incentivize, how are we going to bring in the private sector in this process. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you, Peter. You also mentioned a range of different things, and we don't want to go and carry each of them. But one thing you just mentioned was the private sector, and we are lucky we have a private sector representative amongst or on the panel. Mr. Bujuan Sauraf. He's a vice president of a large international agricultural business, the Hydrofounds, and it belongs to the Olam Spice Group. Sauraf, I would like to hear from you what is actually what would you like as a company CEO? What would you like to see from government actually to make investments on the on-farm level and to really be serious in modernizing your operations on the farm in terms of irrigation equipment and facilities? So over to you.
Thank you, Wilfred, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be speaking on this panel. To answer your question very quickly, I know we are short on time. I think from a private sector point of view, the challenges that we as buyers of agricultural produce face is a question of reliability of supply, and the part of it which is affected by water availability or water reliability. Also about the aspects of today, increasingly so, sustainability. To be able to produce a sustainably grown product is becoming increasingly important in today's world. And this actually goes back to cover aspects on wastage. It covers aspects on depletion of sources or improper depletion of the sources of water. And of course, cost itself. If we indulge here in both new land and old land farms. And the new lands are typically large farms owned by large farmers or large corporates. And the old land farms are typically smallholders. In the new lands, it's more a question of costs, cost per unit, driven up by salinity factors, as has been discussed earlier in this discussion, and also by the increasing depth of available groundwater. In the Nile Valley, for the smallholder, I see challenges being put up in terms of the impact of irregular supply of water and the quality of water, which has been presented by our farmers to us. I think these would be the broad challenges to address in any effort that comes in towards water management here. The additional, as I listened to the forum, I also realized that modernization costs. There's the question of investment, and we spoke of the smallholder. Very often, an additional problem that the smallholder faces is the size of investment may be in many cases beyond his pocket. I was taking a rough example with my agronomist today. A fadan of land in the old land costs about 30,000 Egyptian pounds to lay up for drip irrigation, while a seasonal irrigation there costs a farmer 2,000 pounds. The leap from a 2,000 pound expense for a season to go on to a 30,000 pound expense in that season may sound good in the long term. It definitely will be beneficial in the long term, but I suppose a challenge there lies there as well, in the farmer actually getting up and putting up this amount for a future benefit, and more, not just in terms of cost, in terms of efficiency, water storage, etc. But the very leap to put that investment may be a challenge that the group may also be addressing. Since I did not get that clearly, I thought I'll put it on the table as well. But these are the challenges of as private sector, I would summarize.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Saraf. That's a very useful for our overall discussion. And I would like to just continue and pick on what you just said in terms of the investment and also the financing aspect. We have Sandra Broker with us. She is a senior agricultural economist who has worked on maximizing financing and development in Egypt, and she has been involved in a very broad sector discussion. So, Sandra, what is actually what is the importance and the significance of the irrigation sector for the overall agricultural development, given that Egypt has this enormous export potential to the UK, to the European Union? Russia is at the moment top importer of Egyptian produce, but also Saudi Arabia and many others. So there is competition on, and there is a market, and the irrigation sector has now the chance to come in. But how do you see this evolving? So Sandra, over to you, please.
You hear me? Yes, okay. So thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to this conversation. Good afternoon, good morning, colleagues. Indeed, I think in summary, Wilfried summarized it very well. The opportunities for Egypt indeed is tremendous. What maybe is not working so well right now is really leveraging these opportunities to make Egypt one of the key exporters globally. But sort of some of these conclusions that I'm going to say are coming really from a work that we did about 2 years ago, and Dr. Saud Nassour may remember this, is when we were looking at what constrains private investment in the agriculture sector, but really looking globally, not just agriculture, but also processing, looking at the whole agri-food system. And at that time, you know, what was very clear is that the market opportunities are tremendous. If I can sort of bring the big picture, the food and beverage market, the value-added market globally, is expected to rise to about $7 trillion by 2030. And Egypt is extremely well positioned to really become a very, very efficient supplier and access the markets. Geographically, it sits in a very good position. It also has the agroclimatic conditions to produce high-value crops and process. So Egypt is really very well positioned to leverage this. But when we looked at the broader sector, what also became very clear that there is a lot of constraints. There is also a lot of issues at this moment that probably need some resolving before Egypt can really step into this global position. When you look at and irrigation is really is an extremely important component in this. As one of the speakers mentioned, agriculture uses 82% of water in Egypt, but there is also the broader context. There is access to markets, there is access to knowledge, access to finance. All of this really needs to be looked into a broader sort of spectrum of solutions going forward. So specifically, if we look at the irrigation, it really goes back to the efficiency message, I think, from our perspective, and increasing productivity. Now, the sort of maybe three main key points, if I can mention. I think the first one would really be going back to what colleagues said in terms of efficiency of the service provision. It goes back to how to grow crops timely when the market needs them. It goes back to how to maximize productivity on the field. In many ways, Egypt is already leader, for instance, in wheat production. Actually, domestic wheat is one of the highest yields globally, but on many, in particular, horticulture crops, which are these high-value crops, Egypt could certainly do better. So irrigation would have a major role to play there. If we look at the on-farm irrigation, I mean, I understand it's a disputable. There's different opinions on whether it needs to investments need to be made on farm in the more modern irrigation systems. But at the same time, if we look at globally at this potential market, where the markets are moving is really towards the many countries trying to access the very high value markets, which have increasingly started looking at sustainability message, at sustainable production, sustainable fair markets. All of this comes back to if your value chains are efficient, if your production is efficient, if your processing is efficient, this message can really bring additional margins to the Egyptian producers, processors, and exporters. So on-farm irrigation, improving on-farm irrigation, modern irrigation technologies, water-saving technologies would definitely contribute to this message. And then thirdly, I think it's going back to the more on the farmer cooperation and this message for. I think there were also references made to the water use associations, to institutional framework. Really, collaboration of farmers is seen globally as one of main ways to improve efficiency in the value chains. When you work with farmer groups, when you try to reach out to farmer groups, you really are reaching them much more effectively. So while the water users associations may have a specific task to do, which is ensure the reliable and timely irrigation service. At the same time, many of these producers are also part of the cooperatives. So the cooperative conversation also needs to be revitalized to make sure that the cooperatives are really market driven, which will then sort of close this feedback feedback loop, if I may say so, that the farmer cooperatives will be able to access markets, these high-end markets. They will generate incomes, which they will be able to bring back then in on-farm investments and strengthening the water user associations. So I think on these three aspects, let me stop. I think we're also a little bit out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is an aspect that you brought up and that was brought up also by Saurabh. So that's obviously something we really have to look into. And I understand there are already existing business models in Egypt that are very successful. So, and that in combination with irrigation could be a very, very interesting and interesting aspect. So we have a little bit of an overrun here of time. We are 3 minutes past 4, so I'm not quite sure how many more minutes we can actually afford to go beyond 4 o'clock. We had a little bit of a delay at the beginning, so I assume we have another 5 minutes. And I would like to get back to Charles actually, because we heard you say drip irrigation is not going very far if we don't improve the service. So why? And associated with this is a risk of soil salinity and salinization. So what is really the most important principle and way forward to scale up the whole process of irrigation modernization, and to at the same time be mindful of the resource base? So, Charles.
Okay, yeah. Thanks. Okay, here's really the bottom line in what I've seen over the years. We can talk about policies, we can talk about all this, but if the water is not controllable, I mean really controllable, if you really can't manage the resource, most of this, well, you just can't get very far. You can't get very far. And then the other thing is, it takes a lot of time. This discussion here, we have to keep in mind, modernization of the water delivery system and control of it is not something that's going to happen in 5 years. It's going to happen maybe in 20 years. And there really is no choice. How do you manage a resource if it's unmanageable? I mean, it's so basic. You're talking about sustainability. You can have economic models, whatever you want, but in the end, you have to be able to control the resource, both for on-farm use and for the aquifer. So what you do is you just start nibbling away. How's that? I don't know if that answers the question.
Charles, yes, this is clearly what in Egypt, the Egyptians would actually say by step.
Yes, step by step.
That's exactly what it is. Dr. Safwat, and I'd like you to have also a word on this. You mentioned that the institutions have been resistant to change. Now, if we don't succeed, if we don't act on institutional reform, what would you say are the consequences of this non-action?
Well, my simple answer to this is that there will be always operational problems which will have impact on water delivery to farmers at the right time and the right place. An institution has to work in harmony. And when we talk about institutions, we talk about water institutions and agricultural institutions. These are the service providers to the farmers, both at the input and the output of the agricultural production system. And for this reason, unless this coordination and actually strategic plans are in place and enforced for implementation, there will be the risk that even providing hardware will not let modernization succeed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Safwan. And with this, I think we should close the discussion. What I would like to say is that I find a sense of being really mindful of the situation at the farm level and the farmers in Egypt, at the stakeholder level or at the medium commercial level or the large businesses. Everything that we do in terms of water management, in terms of improving the irrigation service, is geared to these levels, and that's important. And I get the sense that everyone understands this very well. But it requires, again, as Charles mentioned in his presentation, the devil is in the detail. So we need to pay very much attention to this detail without losing sight of the big picture. And we have demonstrated in this discussion and also in the keynotes and the policy statements how the big picture is actually is very big. We have many things to consider. There's a lot of at stake, and so they working together towards this big picture without detail is very important. And we will, in the next phase of this project, we will focus and break down the various aspects that we heard and touched upon today into digestible bits and chunks of work and work streams and work on the policy and the policy options together with a working group under the Ministry of Water Resources and the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation. And I'm very pleased that we have already outlined the big picture or the elements and dimensions that we want to address in this policy note. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you very much for all the contributors. And the final word is with Heba.
Hello. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes,
we can see you, but we don't hear you.
Yes. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Very well.
Yes.
Okay.
Go on.
Many thanks for everyone for we have had a rich discussion from. Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we had a rich discussion from the government and from. This marks a beginning of a new section or report to the government. Options and the how part of what we've done previously is look channels and prerequisites, and moving forward we need to be looking at how to do this, and as Wilfred has mentioned, this would be an ongoing discussion with both ministries, and we hope that this is a good thing for it, and we will be of course continuing our support to both ministries. And looking forward to more things to come.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you all.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Good. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.